Worship leaders often struggle to communicate to the other musicians on our team. Most worship leaders are either singers, guitar players, or pianists, and so talking to a bass player or specifically talking to a drummer can be really difficult, and we can struggle to communicate what we want our drummers to play. And so if you've ever struggled to know how to communicate what's in your head to the person sitting behind the kit, you're not alone, and we're going to hopefully solve that today in this episode. So we're going to help you talk to them, and we're going to help you possibly tame the beast inside the drum cage in this episode. And we're going to do that with the help of Jon Manna, who founded worshipdrummer.com. He's also a senior pastor, which is awesome. He's a pastor drummer. I wonder if he ever plays from the kit while he preaches. But so John's going to help us cover some of these topics. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover how to best communicate with your drummer, how to arrange songs from a drum part's perspective, because not a lot of worship leaders understand what to play in each section of the song. We're going to name all the pieces of the drum kit for you to demystify that. We're going to give you drum tuning tips and a whole bunch of other things today. So let's welcome Jon to the screen. Hello, Jon. Welcome from Canada.
Hello.
How are you doing, man?
I'm awesome. How are you guys?
We are doing well. Bonjour. Bonjour.
2 languages for you. Ready? Buongiorno in Italian and bonjour for my French friends.
Oh, they're so similar. That's awesome. Well, Jon founded worshipdrummer.com, and he does a ton of equipping for drummers and specifically worship drummers. And so that's why you are here today to drop lots of mad wisdom for us. No pressure. But we are excited to dig into this. And then is there anything in the introduction, you're a pastor, you run worshipdrummer.com. There's probably 1,000 other hats you wear, but is there anything you feel pertinent to the discussion today that you want people to know about you?
I love the local church, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to speak and to hang out. But as a lead pastor to all of our worship leaders, I do want to say thank you, because we share the stage pretty much 50% of the time on any given Sunday or service we're leading in. And that relationship in and of itself has to be healthy. It's very important. And we want God's presence to move. So we have to have that spirit of unity, be on the same page, and make it a big win together, not just as individuals.
Amen. I love it. And maybe we'll have you back to do a conversation about senior pastor worship leader dynamics. That would be probably really good.
Yeah.
So let's talk today about being the drummer, though. So we, as worship leaders, we often know how we feel about our drummers. What's it like from the drummer's perspective? What's it like to be led by us crazy worship leaders? And I'd love to hear what you hear from other drummers are the biggest problems or issues regarding communication between a worship leader and a worship drummer. And for those of you who are watching live, if you want to drop your concerns or issues that you're having with your drummer in the chat, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and I can bring those concerns up to Jon. And we will have our Academy Q&A at the end as well. But yeah, that's a big question. But what are kind of the core problems that you're seeing from the drummer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, worship today is a lot more complex than it was maybe 10 years ago. In our context, I'll speak to that. I don't preach from the drums, but I do play and then come out and then get into announcements and then preach. We run our multi-tracks from the drum cage. And as someone who's been doing this for many, many years, I can handle that pressure. So if you're queuing tracks or Ableton or whatever that looks like, then there's a lot of pressure. There's also a sense of feeling cut off because you are sitting in this fishbowl, as we like to call it. You're the guy at the back that everyone just forgets about and doesn't talk to. But yet we're told you're the backbone of the team in terms of like your instrument. So those are some of the feelings that we have. And then communication. I actually wrote this down just real quick to run through in my 30 years of playing in church. The first time I ever sat at the drums, I was about 12, 13 years old. There was no drummer in the house. And I remember my sister said, call my brother, he has the drumsticks and he could come play. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. And so it was a Sunday night, all hymns. And the bass player would basically tell me, it's a 3/4 pa pa beat. And so it was very verbal. Then when I was in Bible school, we still didn't have in-ears. It was like floor wedges and all that kind of stuff. It was a visual cue from my worship leader friend on acoustics. So he would like, when I lift my guitar up, then you know we're going to end the song. Or if you see my foot tapping, it's because I want more. So it was more of a visual thing I had to pay attention to. And what I see now, which maybe I'll speak to some worship leaders and you can tell this to your drummers, is that our eyes, especially if we have the laptop here, we tend to lock in with a computer now and just see section, they're color coded, all of that, rather than looking to the band and having like some visual communication with MD, having a mic. There's the opportunity for different communication. Some churches have the drummer, everyone on a mic, and they can all talk. That's something I do see as drummers. We get lost in this world where we'll look at the computer, we'll lock in to make sure that we know what section's coming up, we're playing the right part, and suddenly we've forgotten the whole of what's around us. And that could be a big challenge for worship leaders who are trying to get their drummers' attention to say, hey, like you got to watch, because if we're going to move into a flow or a spontaneous moment, I need you to catch where we're at as well. And I could say a whole lot more, but I'll take a breath and let you continue to steer the answer that you want.
That's so good. I mean, I think what you highlighted is the critical importance of the drummer, and yet oftentimes they're underappreciated. They're kind of like the guy in the back who we just assume is going to show up on time to rehearsal, and we're going to assume that they're going to just but we don't appreciate them. We don't appreciate the weight that they carry. I often say that worship leaders own the bus, but drummers drive the bus. I didn't make that up. Somebody made that up smarter than me, but I stole it and I use it because it's so true. Like the drums carry the entire thing, right? And so as I'm hearing you talk, I just feel like this empathy towards drummers where it's like all that pressure is on you. Like when you mess up as a drummer, there's no hiding it, right?
Yeah.
And yet, like you said, oftentimes they're kind of in the back, semi-ignored. So I just want to help worship leaders to grasp that, feel that, and be like, okay, can you appreciate your drummer more? Can you value them a little bit more just from that answer? One thing I think that's worth highlighting is you pointed out the communication aspect in the live setting. So communicating to your drummer live so that they know what's going on. And you talked about two different ways. One was verbally, like using our mouths to like say what we want. But then the other way of communicating was the worship leader said, I'll raise my guitar and tap my foot. And he kind of explained in advance what he wanted and what everything meant. Yeah. And so I guess what I'm saying is it's important for worship leaders to have a dialogue with their drummers about communicating, like, hey, this is what it means when I do this. This is what it means when I do that, and kind of pre-defining different signals. Because some worship leaders might, like if they raise their guitar, the drummer might think, oh, he wants more. And a different worship leader might raise the guitar and he means I want less. So it's important for the worship leader to define his weird body language signals that he's sending to his drummer. So yeah, any thoughts about any of that?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do think it has become a little easier for some churches who have mics for the whole band, because then you can just have a conversation. Everyone hears each other. I know that that's not the majority of churches probably. And so that's where I'll boil all of the communication stuff to the relationship that you build, especially with your drummer, I'll say, because in my experience as a drummer, if your drummer gets it wrong from the beginning, whether it's counting the band in, starting a song, the wrong feel or dynamics, then it's like a train wreck. That bus is not going to arrive at the final destination. So having those conversations and building relationship would also allow for the opportunity in the moment, because you don't want to walk on eggshells every time you have to correct something. And if you spend just a bit of time fostering a healthy relationship with your drummer and you turn around and you're like, hey, no, that was wrong. I don't take it personally. I know your heart. You're not coming at me. You're not against me. It's like, oh, my bad. Like, let's restart that and I'll get it right this time. So that relationship aspect is what it boils down to. More like reading the signs are important, hearing the cues and all of that, but having the relationship is for me the bulletproof part of, hey, we can build off of that relationship and no one's offended. It's a healthy environment to grow and to get better.
Yeah. So all the worship leaders take out your phone and add a calendar date to your calendar this week to take your drummer out. And you pay, worship leader, you pay for that coffee for sure. So, okay, let's talk a little bit more about, oh, by the way, this funny comment came in from Karen, one of our students. She said, the drummers I know are never on time to rehearsal. I joke that they can't keep time away from the kit. That's good, Karen. I like that. So no offense to the drummers. Okay, so how about this? Let's talk more about communication. We talked about in service communicating to the drummer while things are happening. But how can worship leaders better communicate with their drummers either in rehearsal or before rehearsal? Meaning, a lot of times worship leaders that I train are like, I just make noises with my mouth and wave my hands like this and show them what I want. But are there more effective ways for worship leaders to communicate to drummers, like I said, either before, leading up to the rehearsal, or in the rehearsal? If you're feeling stuck, mediocre, or inadequate in your ministry, if you know there must be a better way of doing things but you're not sure how, if you're looking for fresh inspiration and new ideas that will improve your ministry and give you a team that you're proud of leading, then I invite you to join me and over 1,400 worship leaders from all over the world who are growing inside the Worship Ministry Training Academy. In the Academy, you'll find over a dozen practical courses that will give you the confidence and skill that you need to lead with excellence. Our 20 done-for-you admin systems will save you time, streamline your ministry, and reduce the weekly stress, headaches, and chaos of leading a team. I'm talking about things like a completely done-for-you audition process and 20 other time-saving tools just as useful as that. During our weekly Monday huddles, you'll gain perspective and encouragement on the actual problems you're facing in your ministry. You'll also hear from some of your favorite worship leaders right inside the Academy. Past guests include Matt Redman, Phil Wickham, Christian Stanfield, Charity Gale, and many others. Our team devotions will help your team grow spiritually, and our musician training resources will help them improve musically. The best part is it's completely free to try for 15 days. Yes, free. And if you decide to sign up, the Academy is by far the most affordable online worship school out there. Our C3 format is proven to get you results because you get courses, coaching, and community. The courses teach you what to do, the coaches help you apply it to your specific situation, and the community helps you stay accountable and encouraged as you take the right steps to improve the ministry God has called you to. Join thousands of other worship leaders like Alicia and Jaime, who both say the Academy has completely transformed their ministry. I hope you'll start your free trial today, take the guesswork out of building a thriving worship ministry, go to worshipministrytraining.com and click that big red button, and I hope to see you this week inside the Academy.
Yeah, and actually, I wrote some down, some terms that we can implement or use. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not the be-all, end-all, but having a bit of language to explain is helpful. So, for example, one term that a drummer should hopefully understand is 4 on the floor. And what that simply means is in a song that's in 4/4 time, every quarter note gets a kick beat. So, did I write an example for that?
Well, just like do, 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 do.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so instead of you trying to say, like with your foot and, on every, and some worship leaders are great singers, but they just don't have music theory background. So they won't know it's a quarter note. They're just like, hit it every time, right? But 4 on the floor, okay, you want me to drive this thing a little with 4 on the floor, and it might be just at the chorus, not for the verse, right? So that's one term. Another term is driving. Like, I need you to drive this part of the song. And that term driving means pushed or playing just on top of the beat. And one of the songs that I wrote down was like Lion and the Lamb. I know it's a little older, but that's one of the songs where it feels like it's always sitting on top. It's just pushing. It's not dragging. It's not right on, locked in. It's pushing. And any song by Stuart Copeland as a drummer, The Police, if you want to understand what driving feels like, listen to his drumming for The Police. Another term was delicate, right? So if it's like a soft, instead of just saying, no, be quiet or keep quiet at this part, it's like, I want you to color in delicately. And you don't have to tell them how, but they should be able to interpret like maybe the cymbals or just very softly on the tom here. And then we can build from there. Washi, which to me would be like cymbals are resonating, whether it's with mallets or you're just playing like loud and washy on your ride or a crash ride. And then full, like I need this to be full, which does not mean like play everything all at once, like a drum solo or a drum fill. It just means play big. And usually that would be at the last chorus of a song or the last time you're singing this bridge going into the chorus. And it's just a big groove. One of the songs for that full part, we're doing O Come All Ye Faithful, the Passion one, His Name Shall Be. And it's like the whole song is slow to build, but then finally it hits the chorus at the very end, going back to the bridge. When it goes back to the bridge the very last time, it is a full groove, big sound, and that's how I would use some of the language. Trash can ending is another one. Just, yeah. Or they might say crash it out at the end, right? So those are some, like, what, 5, 6 terms, and maybe your drummer doesn't know them, especially if they're a little younger and they're newer to the space. Having some common vernacular would be very helpful, even if you guys make it up, to say, when we say this is what it sounds like. And you could look at YouTube videos or find like specific spots in the music and just say, we'll call this that. And every time we say it, this is what we mean.
Yeah, that's good. Sitting down with them and kind of defining like, hey, tom groove means this.
Yeah.
Or I want a hi-hat groove like this. I think that's really helpful. With all the resources online now, I think drummers should be able to find examples of what to play where, especially with all like the multi-tracks tutorials and all this stuff where it's already like pre-recorded with just the drum kit. And I know you guys do a lot of that on your YouTube channel. Yeah. And so just watching some of Jon's stuff, which we'll link below, and talking about those things with your drummer ahead of time can help a lot, I think. And you mentioned arranging the song a little bit, like I want this section to be washy or whatever. So we're actually going to talk about the common ways to arrange each section of a song in a little bit. But before we do, I kind of want to talk about music theory, because you mentioned a lot of worship leaders don't know music theory. What are at least some of the bare minimum music theory terms that a worship leader needs to know in order to effectively communicate to the drummer?
It's a heavy one. I think I could boil it down to just a couple, not to get like super technical, but tempo. And we would likely say, what's the BPM of the song? If you're using like an actual metronome where your drummer is inputting the BPM, he would need to know, or she would need to know that. A lot of times if you're playing with tracks, it's embedded there already with click and cues. But tempo is important. So that's how fast the song is or how slow. Dynamics is another, and every part of a song would likely have different dynamics. And so to be able to map out what that looks like, the tempo usually doesn't change throughout the whole song. And then I'd say the last term that I would add is groove and feel, because you can have the feel. Is it straight? Is it shuffle or swing a bit? So let me just give you an example. Is it like, or is it, right? So that last one has more of that shuffly feel to it. That first example is straight. And it is a technical knowledge to have and to be able to call out. One of the songs that I actually had our team stop doing was Graves into Garden, because between acoustic and drums, like the patterns were off. Someone was playing it as if it was straight. Someone was playing it as if it was like a swing. So then I was like, okay, until we can grow in that area, we're just not going to play that song.
I love it. Yeah, a lot of 6/8 songs can tend to swing. Someone on the team can start to swing a 6/8 song pretty quickly. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right. BPM, which stands for beats per minute, tempo or whatever, and then the time signature. Hey, this is a 3/4 song, or this is a 6/8 song, or this is a 4/4 song. I think at least those terms. I'm thinking through. I didn't write any notes about this, but I'm thinking through different phrases that I say to my drummers that maybe worship leaders already intuitively do, but if you don't, here are just a couple extra ones. Like a lot of times when we're going through a song, I'll be like build, 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 and or I'll be like straight build, right, which just means like straight, or I'll be like a tom build, which is more like kind of the ride and the tom's kind of like grooving up into a crescendo. So straight build, tom build. Darby wrote backbeat, which backbeat is like the full backbeat when it's like boof, 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 like it's got everything in it. A light snare roll. I'll say, hey, can you do something, a light pattern on the snare, right? Those types of terms are things that I use. Or, hey, can you make it big? That's such a dumb thing, but hey, make it big. So those are just some of the terms. And then you mentioned others like crash it out or trash can. So I think maybe what I'll do is I'll compile a list of terms that drummers can use, or maybe you already have one on your website.
At one point, I did have like a whole sheet of terms from when I did some workshops, and I can't find it. I tried finding it before this.
This is why we need to upload all of our stuff to AI and just ask it, where is that thing that I had? Yeah. Let's talk more about arranging songs for drums. Actually, before we talk about arranging songs, let's talk about just all the pieces of the drum kit, just so everybody has proper terminology. Because I know some worship leaders, they don't know anything. And I know most of the people who listen to worship ministry training, they know everything, which is awesome. Yeah. But there are some people that are going to listen to this that are like, I don't know what that little thing that opens and closes is called. So just very, very, very quickly, like 30 seconds or less, tell us every single piece of the kit. I mean, 30 seconds might be too short, but go for it.
Yeah. And a lot of churches have different setups. So I'll do like a standard worship drummer setup. So on the left, if this is a right-handed drummer, let's say, on the left side, you would have the hi-hat that closes and opens. I'm not going to get into sizes because those vary, but you would use that with your left foot traditionally. Then you have your snare in the middle. And then above your snare would be your high tom or your rack tom. And then to the right side of that is your low tom or your floor tom. And then below that, big round guy is your kick or your bass drum. So those are the drums. We talked about the hi-hat. Now, above that tom would be your left crash, which they would call your main crash cymbal. Then jumping over to the other side is your ride, and a lot of times it's a ride that you can crash on as well. And then one more cymbal to the right of that guy, which I know behind me I have it set up, but you won't be able to see it well. And so that's basically it. Sometimes they'll also have a drum pad, a Roland SPDSX or the like. And that's like in its basic form. And then the things they hold are called drumsticks. Mallets, they can do some cymbal swells or some tom fills with them to add some different tone.
And the reason why I wanted you to go through those is because right now we're going to talk about what to hit for each section of a song in a general sense. Like in most songs, this is how you're going to want to arrange the drums. And so I wanted to define the parts so that when I say, hey, you're going to hit the ride, people know what that means. What I'll do just to make this valuable and fast for people is I'm going to talk through a general kind of approach to arranging a song. Obviously, every song's different and you're going to have to vary these strategies, but I want you to add your 2 cents to it and or contradict me and or correct me and or just whatever. Like feel free to just say, actually, I disagree with most of that. So guys, when you're arranging a song, obviously the safest thing to do is to just watch what the actual song drummer plays. Okay, so go on YouTube and watch the song, listen to the song and go, okay, these are the parts and my drummer should learn these parts. That's like the easy way, right? But let's talk about more advanced arranging. Like what if you write your own song and you want to arrange it? What if you want to play Graves into Gardens with a totally different feel? Or what if, we should be creative as musicians. And that's one thing that I just want to encourage everybody in general is I think too many churches just literally copy the record and don't add any of their own church's musical vocabulary to the picture. And to me, that's a little bit sad and it limits the creativity that God put in the earth. But so let's say you want to arrange your own song. Here are kind of just some quick overviews of what you might do in each section. And John, again, feel free to correct me or challenge and or like add your 2 cents. But
sure.
So for anything that's quiet, you probably want to just like if it's a beginning of a quiet song, you want to go beyond the ride or some cymbal swells with the mallets, right? Potentially, you could do some really soft snare patterns like paradiddles, kind of rhythms, type stuff, right? Yeah. For verses, typically, again, not always, it's typically like a closed hi-hat and a simple groove with a fair amount of space, not too much kick, not too much snare, just simple groove, a lot of space, and on a closed hi-hat, typically. I mean, it could be on a rim of a drum instead of a hi-hat, but go ahead.
Sometimes they'll hold off. So a lot of it is layers. And I think of a cake. I don't know why. You don't want to start with the full cake at the very beginning. So sometimes what's common, and everything you've said is 100% true, but what I've noticed is more prevalent in newer songs is that the first verse, if it's verse 1, chorus, verse 2 will come in with the groove. And verse 1 would be maybe like on a tom, I just want to speak the name of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's 4 on the floor, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like doom, doom, doom. And that doesn't even come in till a little later in the song. But
Right.
yeah, anyways, just
No,
to
no.
say, like, the more you can hold off, it almost seems like that's how a lot of newer songs are written.
That's perfect. No, I love that. That's exactly right. Because I'm oversimplifying. I'm saying
Of course.
often if you know nothing, like
Yeah.
a simple quiet hi hat. But actually, what John is saying, it's way more nuanced than this. You might have nothing in verse 1, or you might have a slight tom groove with not a lot of layers of cake on it, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is it's less. So the second thing is right before a chorus, typically you want to create a little more energy so it starts to transition into the chorus. And you can do this, one of the ways, if you're on that hi-hat groove, is by opening your hi-hats a little bit so that it
Yeah.
starts to get a little bit more aggressive and bitey sounding. And you want to do this like maybe 4 bars before the chorus. That's just a generalization. But like you want to start to open your hi-hats to build the intensity into the chorus. I don't know if you want to jump in there or if you want me to keep going.
100%.
Okay.
You're right. Bang on.
So in the choruses, typically, again, this is very generalized, but typically you're going to have like, it could be a closed hi-hat and other band members add layers. But if it's a small band and you need to create the energy for the chorus, then the chorus is going to be a little bit more intense than the verse. And so what you're going to want to be on is you're either going to want to be on a slightly open hi-hat, or you want to maybe go to the ride and hit the ride. And Darby asked what's the difference between the ride and the crash. A ride is a larger cymbal that is kind of pingy. It can be washy too, but it carries the right-hand subdivisions. So it's like the alternative to your hi-hat, right? So yeah, choruses, either a ride groove or an open hi-hat groove. And then we can talk about bridges in a second. Do you want to step in here at all?
No, you're doing great, man.
Okay, that's kind of the verses and the choruses. Let's talk about the bridges. There's kind of an up bridge or there's a down bridge. So I'll start with the up bridge. The up bridge usually is a bigger climax than the chorus because it's like the tip of the song or almost the tip of the song, right? That final chorus is gonna, and by the way, in the musical excellence course, guys, if you haven't taken that course, please go in and take that course for those who are Academy members, because we cover how to build the dynamics and the frequencies and really build a song to make it crescendo and climax the right way with all the different pieces. So let's talk about the big bridge. So big bridge is a big climax. You're typically going to want to go to your ride real big and like washy, like hitting it hard, not hitting like the bell, but like, and again, maybe in gospel music, we would hit the bell, but so that's why I said this is general. So big open ride or washing on the crash, like a big 16-inch crash cymbal, like so that would be like a big bridge. Or if it's a down bridge, you might bring it all the way down, have some cymbals, and then kind of start to build with the tom groove and build back into that final epic chorus. And that last chorus is going to want to be a lot of energy. So you want to hit the washy ride or open hi-hat or crash cymbal even. So that's a general overview of how to build a song dynamically on a drum kit. Do you want to add anything?
Well done, man. Do you play drums as well?
I do, yeah. Probably nowhere as good as you.
No, that's
Yeah.
cool. And the one thing I'll say is modern worship, we're using big cymbals. When I was playing, it was a 16-inch crash 20 years ago. A lot of the stuff behind me on my kit, my ride is 24-inch, and then the crash cymbals are 22s. So they're big, and we would naturally maybe tend to think bigger equals louder, which is not the case. The 16-inch we've done away with because they're too bright. They cut through the mix, and modern worship sound, it is more washy. It blends and is way more forgiving. So yeah, less bell unless you're playing gospel. Bigger hi-hats, like 16-inch, are like the standards now, which is crazy.
Yeah, and we're going to talk to John about cymbals. We're going to talk to John about drum tone and tuning in a little bit. So hold tight about all that. And yeah, so actually, maybe we should jump into that now since we're here. I did want to ask you, how can worship leaders better serve their drummers, but maybe we'll save that towards the end. So remind me if I forget that, because that's an important question, guys. We are called to wash the feet of our team. All right, so let's talk about drum tone. We'll start with the cymbals since we're already there. You mentioned larger cymbals. There's a term out there called darker cymbals.
Yeah.
And why should we use darker cymbals? Should we use darker cymbals? And yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, dark does not mean evil, just for clarity's sake. And I've worked closely with... So let me tell you a crazy story. I had Zildjian, which is a company that's been making cymbals for 400 years. And this is not a knock on the company, but somewhere along the line, they missed the target in terms of worship. So they reached out and they were looking for someone, like they needed pictures to put on their boxes of cymbals. So somehow they landed on my email address and they were like, we have a worship cymbal pack and then a gospel cymbal pack. And you know, when you read that, you understand they have different sounds. And so I helped them get the photo with the drummer for that pack and then the photo and the drummer for the other pack. When it came to the worship pack, the worship community was so angry and upset, not because of whose picture was on it, but because of the kind of cymbals that Zildjian decided would make up the pack. I don't think I've ever shared this story, but they were like very bright sounding cymbals and they were smaller sizes. And so the worship community goes, none of us are playing these things. So like, I was like, guys, don't get mad at me. I didn't assemble the pack. I just found someone to be on the box. So I think they missed the mark on that one. So bigger means darker. Darker means bigger cymbals. And the reason being is because they blend better with the sound and the style. The drums themselves, the toms at least, have gotten larger. Instead of a 10-inch, you're at a 12 or 13. And then a 16-inch floor tom. But the cymbals, and I even, for the cymbals behind me, I worked with Paul from Passion. He drums for Passion Conferences, Passion City Church. And then also Simon Kobler, who was drumming for Hillsong United. I was like, guys, I'm buying new cymbals. So I got Heartbeat cymbals. You can't go wrong with Heartbeats. Red cymbals as well. Dylan makes great cymbals for worship. And they understand worship. They're not just trying to sell you a worship cymbal pack that's out of touch, so to speak. So yeah, darker is the current trend. A lot of guys, I don't know if you've seen in pictures or different YouTube videos, they have these like round plexiglass discs almost in front of the cymbals, as opposed to a full drum shield. And that's simply for not having the cymbals show up in their mics. So mic bleed, it's to stop that. But if the room is much louder and smaller, perhaps, you'll need a full shield. So yeah darker cymbals, generally the way to go.
Darker and bigger. And Jared, one of our members, said, our drummer discovered Heartbeat. I was skeptical at first, but now I love them. So I've heard great things about Heartbeat. I've also, I don't know if you know about this company. I've never used them, but I heard about this company called Dream. It's a Chinese company. Supposedly it's warmer tone. And you can comment in a second, but the one that I love, and somebody got mad at me because it has like an Islamic moon on it, but it's called Istanbul. It's a Turkish cymbal company, Istanbul. They have a cymbal called Traditional Dark. It's a traditional dark thin. Every single Istanbul cymbal traditional dark that I bought, I loved. They're so musical sounding. So are there any other companies that people should look out? You mentioned Red, you mentioned Heartbeat, I mentioned Istanbul traditional dark, and then
what I will say is they're all made in Turkey.
Oh,
all of them. And so they're great quality. Istanbul, if you watch any of the drum gear rundowns on our YouTube channel, I've done them at like the Belonging Co. with Austin Davis, Kendall Smith, who played at last year's conference there, and a whole bunch of other guys, David Whitworth with Brandon Lake or Bethel. They're all using Istanbul, but they're very pricey.
Yes.
So the difference, I'd say, with Red or Heartbeat is you're also getting the care. So you'll have great customer care. They love the church. I met Dylan. He actually came to Toronto. He's from Australia. He makes red cymbals. And he's like, hey, he showed up to my church. So then we had coffee afterwards. And I just got to hear his heart. He's like, man, I'm in this because I want to bless the church. And so there are great companies, not one better than the other per se, other than how they will love and care for the people. So, yeah, I mean, find something you love. It has to sound good. If it doesn't sound good, it doesn't matter how much you paid or how little you paid. You want something that's going to last and that sounds great. And
Yeah.
any of these three that we've mentioned, you can't go wrong with.
Yeah, and the reason why you don't want bright, John already mentioned, is just it eats up so much of the frequency spectrum in that range of like vocal and guitar and electric guitar. It just eats all of that up. Yeah. So you want to get warm, dark, out of the way cymbals that just kind of wash and blend in with the mix. Let's talk about the drums. You talked about larger drum sizes. Do you have any tips for tuning? I know you don't want to get too technical, but any general tips for worship leaders? A lot of worship leaders are like, we have this junky old church kit. I mean, God bless you guys. Do the best you can. We will get into the electric versus acoustic kit question in a minute because one of the students asked. But let's talk about tone, tuning your drums. Any tips, pro tips that you can share about tuning drums?
Yeah, give me 1 sec. I'm going to grab my TuneBot.
TuneBot. We're all going to be replaced by robots soon, John.
So this is just the case. I'm not great at tuning drums. A lot of guys, their drums sound so good, and I've asked them, like, do you use anything? They're like, no, I just tune by ear to what sounds good. Some of them have like a science to it. So this is a TuneBot, and in this TuneBot, it's hard to explain, but basically you find the right frequency and you tune it to that. There is a drum dial which tunes to the right tension. And both of those are different approaches to it. So you could go super technical on that. There's one guy, Ryan Prim, on Instagram. Like, he'll hit his snare and then he'll show you like his settings on the TuneBot, which is really cool to try to like practice and get better. There are other YouTube channels that will show this. There's also a video that Elevation Worship did with Vincent Baynard, one of their drummers, in the studio, where they show you how they get, I think it was more the snare that he was tuning. And maybe I could send you that link once I find it. Super helpful. If you like that Bethel snare, there's an old video buried on our Instagram page with David Whitworth showing he's got like 42 strands on the snare drum. They use like an 8-inch deep snare. And then he shows like how he does it. I think it's finger tight and then quarter turns all the way around. So you can have like a way about it, but honestly, most people will say, do it until it sounds good. And I will say this though, if you have old drum heads, you're already at a disadvantage. So one simple thing is to buy new drum heads and start from there. If you're going to like go down this journey of trying to tune the drums to sound great. And don't cheap out on the Rezo heads underneath either. It would be great to also change those if you're buying new drum heads on top.
Do you have a favorite drum head that a lot of times people just want the answer from the expert? Tell us what to buy. Do you have a favorite?
Mine is the Evans G2 Clear.
Okay, Evans, yeah. I'll link that below, guys. Obviously, you'll need to make sure that it's the right sizes for each of your drum sizes. But another question about, I wasn't planning on asking this, but miking drums. You know, a lot of worship leaders do mic their drums. For those who don't, you know, obviously, I would just say at least get the kick and snare mic'd up. But if someone has like a drum cage and they do have the capability to mic all their drums, and they don't have a tiny budget, but they also don't have like the supreme budget, what's the middle of the road mics that you think that worship leaders should check out?
That's a good question. At our church, honestly, we have a set of Shure. It's been so long, and they were not high end at all. I can't remember. It's the pack that came with the XLR. So, you know, it's not a high end pack when it comes with XLRs. But honestly, they sound great. And I would submit my thought, my opinion, I could be wrong, that it matters much less the kind of mics you have. But if you have someone who's great at mixing, even our broadcast mix, because those are two separate things for us at our church, you can't tell the difference if I spent $2,000 or like the $400 that we did. My 10 cents. There will always be that guy at your church who will know the difference. Don't get me wrong, but I would submit 99%. It sounds great if they can mix it well.
And if your drums are tuned and they don't have ancient heads. right?
Yes.
So
A popular one I've seen a lot are the Sennheiser E906, and that's just the tom mics. And then SE Electronics, they sent me the mics that I have, but they are like Mav City, who else? Kirk Franklin Tours, they all got SE Electronics on their stuff nowadays.
okay, I'll link that as well. I hope I can use an AI bot to pull out all the resources that I'm mentioning. Okay, before we talk about electric versus acoustic, because I do want your opinion on that, I want to talk about general drumming tips. So, first of all, what makes for a great worship drummer? That way, our worship leaders can kind of articulate that to the drummers that they're training. Let's start with that question. What makes for a good worship drummer?
That's a question I've asked a lot of professional worship drummers, if I can use that term. It's someone who plays to the song, that does the song justice. Obviously, we're not just here to play music, we're here to lead people in worship. So, like for me as the pastor now, who cares if you can play the parts right if your heart's not right? So, let's come prepared with our heart ready to worship and prepare and know the stuff you're doing so that you can be free to worship, right? But then play to the song and then recognize that you're there not to be noticed, but so that Jesus can be exalted, and serve the team and serve the song. I'll say it simply like that.
Yep. Serve the team, serve the song, don't overplay. Can you get specifics now into drum tips? Drum tips. So we talked about what makes a good worship drummer, but what are like some tips that drummers may or may not be aware of, or worship leaders aren't aware of? I'll give you an example. I recently, in like the last 5-6 years, learned that you're supposed to hit the drums hard and the cymbals soft. So you're supposed to kind of pull, you're not supposed to hit your cymbals like full with your whole strength. You're supposed to be a little bit more gentle with the cymbals, but harder on your actual drums. I don't know if that's true, but can you give us those types of tips? Any tips like that for drummers? Yeah.
I mean, if you're playing hard from the get-go, your sound guy, and this happens in our building, he's not even on and we can hear him so loud in the house. So it's learning that I don't have to play loud so that I feel good, but that it's, again, serving the room. And we want that sound to come through. So yeah, I think as a rule of thumb, it's like you can go louder on your toms and then a little softer on your cymbals. One thing I alluded to earlier that I'll come back to is like lift your head up and connect with the people around you. I know you're at the back, maybe you're in a drum enclosure, but don't be so locked into the computer or just in your own little bubble, but look around, connect even with people that are sitting in the congregation that you're seeking to lead in worship. And I would say sometimes in my context, people have told me like, you got to use your brushes because it's too loud. And I would rather you tell me it's too loud and then let me figure out what I need to do to adjust. And that goes back to worship leader or front of house guy, drummer relationship, where I had to have those conversations when I was a drummer to say, brushes aren't the be all end all or hot rods. But if you tell me what you're hearing or what your feedback is, I will know how to adapt my playing and not just whip out brushes for like I Believe by Phil Wickham. I'm just trying to think any...
Well, when you were talking about the sound guy and the relationship part of it, I thought about one tip for drummers. Do not hit your snare when your sound guy is down by the snare adjusting the microphone. I can't believe people do that. Like the sound guy's ear is right there. He's trying to get in there and fix the angle and you're just like crack, crack, crack. And you're like, dude, stop.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I'll add this too, like especially during sound check when it's not your turn, or if you're like stopping and the worship leader is giving some instruction, it bothers me when drummers, because they're so in their own world sometimes, they just start to noodle, thinking no one's going to hear this, and don't do that. And so worship leaders build that relationship so that they don't get offended when you ask them to stop noodling.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. That is like probably the most annoying thing possible is when you have a drummer who every single time in between songs, they're just like, and you're like, dude, Stop.
Yeah.
Like, you're so loud. We're talking about vocal parts. Stop drumming. Like, wait till the song starts, then drum. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, real quick, let's begin wrapping it up. I want to ask you acoustic electric conversation. I also want you to tell worship leaders how we can better serve our drummers in all senses. And then we'll get into our Academy Q&A. So electric versus acoustic, you can go anywhere you want with that question. Thoughts, comments. Yeah.
I have a love-hate relationship with electronic drums. I've had wild experiences playing at different churches when I was in Bible school, especially traveling with the travel team. One guy brought home the power every week so no one would touch them. And then we were there for rehearsal with no drums. The songs that we needed, I had to have like snares off. And you couldn't do that. Or like a cymbal swell was like instead of like a smooth one. So those are some of the challenges. Now, technology has gotten a lot better on some new stuff, but they're very expensive as well. At our second location, for example, we do setup, teardown. We don't have time or the budget to have a drum shield, drum mics, all of that stuff. So it's just an electronic drum kit. And guess what? It's been really good. It served our purpose well. Is it my preference? No. But if my heart now as the drummer is, hey, I'm here to serve, then it's not about what Jon Manna likes or doesn't like. It's what makes sense in this context. Also, the room that our second location's meeting in is not a big one. So if I brought these drums, they would be like cannons going off in that room. So again, I think it comes down to the willingness to serve. And yeah, technology has gotten a lot better if your budget can afford it. I mean, DW makes electronic drums and they're like $10,000. Roland has some new electronic drums that are $10,000. So you can go to town and they feel and sound real and they're still electronic, but then it's like, do we have the budget? Is that realistic just to make a drummer happier?
Yeah.
I would say probably not worth it.
Yeah. Real quick, Jared says that Zildjian Alchemy are new and his drummers love them and want to play them, which is very interesting. So I'll check that out after. Thanks, Jared. Okay, I will just tag on to what you said, which you already said it. If you're in a tiny room, dear worship leader, you probably just should go and get an electric kit because you will not get a good sound. It'll overpower everything. You will get a better sound out of an electric kit in a small room, even though it's not as dynamic to play. So I'm just going to definitively state that. Go ahead.
Let me add one last thing. One thing with the electronic drums in a small room is that one of our drummers hits really hard to begin with. And so in a smaller room, like the sound is pretty loud, but you still hear the tack, tack, tick, tack, poka when he hits like a bit of the rubber on it. So that part we haven't figured out yet, but I agree 100% that your mix should sound better overall in a smaller space.
That is an unsolved problem, that the rubber tip, tap, tip sounds. Okay, two things. First, tell us where people can find you online. Then I want you just to give a final encouragement to worship leaders to how to serve their drummers. And then we'll jump into some Academy questions because we're getting a lot of good questions on the side here. So yeah, tell us about worshipdrummer.com, what you do, where people can find you, the worship samples that you have, or the drum samples, and then anything else you want to plug. And then tell us how worship leaders can serve their drummers better. So in that order.
Very cool. So yeah, worshipdrummer.com. It was a blog that I started in 2011, which is a long time ago. Had no idea what I was doing, but was exploring WordPress at the time. And Mondays are my days off as a pastor. So I was writing one blog post every Monday, and it just blew up from there. I thought it would be like a local Toronto thing because I was new to this area, moving from Montreal to Ontario. And long story short, the word got out. Jared Henderson from, at the time, Desperation Band sent an email. I thought, is this a friend playing a joke on me? Like, how is this getting out there? So worshipdrummer.com today, I would love to just direct your attention to our podcast. Tell your drummers about it. It's just called the Worship Drummer Podcast. It's on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is also a very fun place. Every time, whether it's like been in the past Hillsong United, Young and Free. Bethel Music was just here about a month ago. About 2 weeks ago, Mav City Music was coming through, and I'll go there backstage, interview the drummers, have GoPros on most of their drum kits, and then mix that and then post those videos and drum cam shots of the songs, which is a very cool thing. We'll do drum gear rundowns where they'll talk about their drum heads, cymbals, mics for some of them. So that's really cool. And then Instagram, we have a big community there, and it's just at Worship Drummer on all of those. And then Worship Drum Samples is a little side project that I started in 2021 for Worship Drummer's 10th anniversary. And basically, one of my friends who plays drums for Taya Smith, he creates all of these drum samples, which are perfectly matched to worship songs. So instead of a lot of worship leaders do this job actually of finding the right things and then loading them into drum pads for their drummers perhaps. But you can go to our website, worshipdrumsamples.com, search by song, and then if we have it there, you just download those drum samples, upload them in the pad, and they're ready to go. So we have artist packs as well. Jared Henderson happens to be one of those artists, so that's really cool that we got to collaborate on some drum samples of his stuff. And one more drummer from Germany, from Outbreak Band. So yeah, that's just a little bit. And then to answer the last question of how can worship leaders serve drummers, I think it's just asking them, hey, are you well-resourced? Do you have what you need when you show up? And is there anything I could help you with? And sometimes it just might be I'm just going through a hard time. There was that comment earlier when we just jumped on from someone saying their drummer is never on time. There might be a reason or something going on as to why they can't show up on time. It might be, personally, they need to have more discipline. I've learned through the years there's always room for growth, but just asking shows that you care and removes that idea of you're just the guy at the back. Super important, but as long as you're here on time and you show up with your parts, then we don't care. Everything's good, which is not how we want them to feel. It's, hey, I just want to make sure you're well looked after. Is there anything I can pray with you about? And do you have the stuff that you need? Is it new drum skins? And maybe they're just too afraid to ask because they don't know if there's a budget for it or something.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jon, thank you so much for your wisdom, and really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm excited to continue it in our Academy Q&A right now. We'll jump into some of the questions, but thank you, and thanks for all you're doing to resource the church. If a listener is watching after the fact, make sure you check all the links, and if you want to join us in these post-interview conversations and Q&A sessions, check out the Academy, worshipministrytraining.com. It's free to try for 15 days. And so we'll run the outro and we'll continue our Q&A. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope this episode encouraged you, helped you, and pushed you forward in your ministry. If it helped you, can you take a second and help us by sending it to just one person that you think needs to hear this? And if you're feeling extra nice, leave us a nice, shiny 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or like this video if you're watching it on YouTube. If you want to discuss this episode or ask questions, we do have a free section in our Academy where you can post comments and questions and chat with other worship leaders just like you, and also sample some of our courses. And you can go to worshipministrytraining.com/free to join us inside the free portion of the Academy. If you're looking for more, check out the Full Access Academy. You can get 15 days for just $1 to start and try things out. Again, you can try all of it for 15 days for just $1 by going to worshipministrytraining.com. Hope to see you inside the Academy, or else I'll see you next month for another helpful episode.